get started. So howdy everyone. Welcome to today's Adoption Strategy Community Open Forum. So we are moving from wild to wrangled. Today as we dive into the high stakes world of lasting TBM adoption using CMDB data. We all know that data is the lifeblood of TBM, but getting it organized can feel overwhelming at times. So today is an interactive session where your engagement really does matter. So we do encourage you all to turn on your cameras if you can. If you do not mind, we are recording this session. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll answer them as we can, and there will be a Q&A session as well. But truly, we do encourage this to be collaborative. So just a few housekeeping. So while I go over housekeeping, Michael is going to bring up the audience poll for our speakers to get to know you all better. Well, y'all, I am from the South. I am a true Southern girl, so you might hear me say y'all a few times. But because of the session topic and theme, I feel like it's okay. To minimize background noise, please ensure you are muted upon entry. Through your video is always welcome. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A chat box throughout the session or ask them live when prompted. Finally, don't worry about taking extensive notes. The presentation slides will be available afterwards on TBM Connect and on YouTube. So I will be sending out a follow-up email with all the links. So you'll have my personnel email and the TBM Council email as well if you need any questions answered. And just a little bit on our strategy community. So the power of community. Beyond the tools and the data, the heart of the TBM Council lies in our strategy communities. These are collaborative groups of practitioners, your peers, who meet to tackle real-world TBM challenges, share lessons learned, and grows their professional network. Structure and focus. We organize these into two main pillars to ensure the content is relevant and to you all's specific needs. So we have areas of interest and we have industry verticals. The areas of interest are covered functional domains like adoption, maturity, cloud, infrastructure, SBM, and agile. And then we have our industry verticals such as government, banking, and insurance. You can join these on TBM Connect, and I do strongly encourage that you would join at least one. You can join as many as you would like. I'm a member of every single one. And it's just kind of our one-stop shop for open forums. If you have any questions, if you'd like to engage in an area of interest or in industry verticals, there's taxonomies for industry verticals. And then looking ahead for 2026, the ecosystem is always evolving. And so are we. We are incredibly excited to launch 3 brand new communities this year. We have Data for TBM in the works, TBM and Enterprise Architecture, and TBM for AI. If any of these are part of your roadmap, now is the time to get involved and help shape the conversation. So if you're a member of the community, feel free to join. There is a tab for strategy communities, but I will be sending a link. So you can go directly to the adoption community or you can view all of our strategy communities. And here we are, which are a bit informal from strategy communities, but in a way somewhat similar. So they share valuable insights through our virtual platform, so TBM Connect. They are a little less formal, so they don't have a set of deliverables that they have to set out, but they are peer engagement. It's an online space to have conversation, share best practices and resources amongst each other. And if there is a lot of interest in engagement, there is a possibility that a special interest group can become a strategy community. And this is just a special highlight and shout out to our adoption work group. So just want to highlight the core engine driving our progress. The TBM adoption work group, which is currently includes 12 dedicated members. This group was set out to unite professionals from technology, finance, business to embrace the successful adoption of best-in-class TBM outcomes. So as you can see, the composition is highly diverse, led by our executive sponsor, Bumbi Chima, former Chief Technology and Transformation Officer at BCU. And then we have an excellent representation from finance, like Amy Bialik, VP of SBM, strategy, Monica Braun with IT financial strategist, and then technical and IT roles, ensuring well-rounded perspectives. So here you can see all the members of our adoption strategy community. And then here we have our TBM framework. So this is kind of the talk of the town. Well, not kind of, this is the talk of the town. But the TBM framework, which you can find elaborate web pages on our website on tbmcouncil.org. And I can throw a link in the chat. Well, Michael, if you don't mind, can you throw a link in the chat? Today's session will align with not only the foundational elements of data and methods, but it will also potentially cover discussions around outcomes and organizational value drivers. And this is today's agenda with TBM adoption and CMDB data. I will be handing this over to Adam. Just kind of give speaker introductions and just kind of go over what we will be discussing today. But I just want to say a special thank you to you all joining today.
Thanks, Seja. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Happy to introduce, we got two awesome speakers today, Paul Krantz and Justin Graff. Paul is currently a ServiceNow strategy and architecture consultant. He's an experienced IT professional and leader dedicated to impactful organizational transformation. Paul specializes in the ServiceNow platform leadership strategy and solution architecture. His focus lies in solving complex business challenges by aligning teams, technical ecosystems, and processes to achieve outcomes that meet strategic goals, all while ensuring the solution is grounded by sustainability with incremental value delivery. Justin is currently serves as the director of IT at Bowman Joint Clinic, where he leads the organization's technology strategy with a strong focus on driving measurable value and cost savings through smarter service-based IT. Before taking on his current role, Justin spent more than 17 years at Marshfield Clinic Health System, where he helped mature IT service management and play a major part in integrating TBM across the organization by connecting IT to the business. Over the years, he partnered closely with teams across TBM, application portfolio management, IT assets management, business relationship management, and other groups to gather data to build a clear understanding of what services actually cost and what work goes into delivering them. Justin is known for championing a service management mindset rooted in transparency and accountability. He is passionate about helping organizations understand their services, not just to control spending, but to make better decisions, eliminate waste, and reinvest in what matters most. By breaking down services into the real component, he helps teams shift from gut-based analysis to data-driven value conversations. With more than 2 decades of experience spanning service strategy, business development, and IT leadership, Justin brings a practical, no-nonsense perspective on how organizations can simplify technology services, measure what matters, and use the insight to reduce costs without sacrificing value. His goal is to make IT a strategic, cost-aware partner that gets people excited. And just a little bit about myself. My name is Adam Chen. I'll be moderating today's session on behalf of the TBM adoption strategy community. I have over a decade of experience in cost accounting and allocation, with the past 7 years focusing on the TBM industry. Currently serve as a TBM consulting manager at Accenture. So today, we have 3 topics ready for you all. So first, we will be starting with why TBM needs a strong CMDB foundation, and then we're going to go talk about how to align CMDB records to TBM cost model. And then lastly, we will talk about the wins, all of the success stories of TBM and CMDB. So before we get started, just a quick question for Justin and Paul. What is CMDB and why are we talking about it today?
I think the CMDB is probably the linchpin. It's the key components that need to be assembled to be able to understand how technology components equate to financial components and then equate to services that are delivered to end users. It's the key things that will feed into this model. And it's the key things that will allow people to measure both costs and then decide on whether or not that's a value.
Yeah, I took a slightly different approach to it. I went to a very defined definition here. A mature CMDB is a core foundation to IT service management. And some of the key characteristics when you look at what it is, we have data elements that are referred to as configuration items, and it would not be complete without more acronyms. They're called CIs for short. These CIs are classified into their types, which are called classes. And then that data is normalized. So think of it as we have nesting of children elements within that. These additionally, CIs are represented in relationships as you bring things together to expose what is independently related and then together related for application delivery. So the role of the CMDB, as I contemplated this, has really changed in the last couple of years. And so why is this all important? CIs represent that piece of technology that are combined to deliver those service or products to customers, all while supporting operations, business decisions, automation, and enable cost information to really get at that granular level to bubble up.
Thanks, Justin and Poe. So let's go through our first topic. Poe, I'm still continuing to pick on you. What challenges do organizations face when adopting TBM without reliable CMDB data?
Yeah, well, following our Western theme today, it would be like heading out west in the 1800s. For the most part, you know your inventory, what you're traveling with. You kind of have some bigger destinations or landmarks out there. You're not really clear of the path or the understanding of everything, but you're going to try to make a go of it. While organizations are not all the same, there are some common challenges when trying to adopt TBM without a reliable CMDB. First is trust in data. You know, does that CI, does that piece of equipment or technology really exist? Are there any relationships with it, and where did those come from? The breadth of the data. Do I have everything that's in my environment today? And last but not least, sustainability of that data source. Is this current? Do I have everything that I have? So one of the things that's key, I think, and I will bring this up here, is a CMDB's health is measured by 3 C's: completeness, correctness, and compliance. And that completeness side of it is, do I have all the expected CIs and their critical attributes? The compliance side of it, do I have the required fields making it business ready? Do I know who owns it, supports it, and where the cost should roll up into? Correctness is really that, do I have everything out there? So as you start to drive into these, understanding where your pain points are and what you're looking at really start to help how you measure it effectively and gain some compliance within your CMDB.
Love it. Thank you, Poe. Now I'm going to pivot to Justin. How does unreliable data turns cost transparency into a Wild West, and what guidance can help teams decide which data to lasso first for TBM success?
So the Wild West with unreliable data, and again, most data I would consider as unreliable until you start using it. And the more you use the data, the more reliable it becomes. In my experience, we've always said, let's just use the data that we have so we understand if it's accurate. And honestly, when you start looking at it, you will find out what's not appropriate and what is appropriate. The Wild West part of it is, if you're using unreliable data, basically you're in a position where you're not able to get the cost down to a specific application, a service, or a consumer. So then other decisions are made. Do we spread the costs across departments evenly? Do we do it by head count? You take some of the scientific portions out of it and you make it more creative at that point to understand how costs go to other departments. So unreliable data results in potentially making bad decisions. It results in allocating things in wrong areas. And when business leaders ask, how much is that service costing me? And if we have to say things like, well, you have 100 employees or 1,000 employees, it costs you this much, you're really kind of missing the point at that point, because you're purely talking about a guess or something that's creative. So it's key to make sure that CIs are there, people understand them, you're looking at them, and kind of what Paul said is over time, you will make sure that they become maintained and managed.
So in your experience, do you recommend people to start using the data immediately, or just wait till you have the perfect data and then implement with TBM?
Yeah, and I say this and hopefully it doesn't scare people, but there's never perfect data. But the only way to get towards perfect is to start looking at it and using it. You'll know pretty quickly whether or not the data is accurate. And sometimes folks will look at the data, they'll question it. And as long as you have the ability to question the data over time, it will become better.
Totally agree. It's definitely a journey that everyone needs to be involved to review the data, make sure everything is aligned.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So before we go to the next topic, does anyone have questions for Justin and Paul? All right, so let's go to the next topic here.
Oh, looks like Lindsay has a question. Lindsay, you can feel free to come off on mic or put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any suggestions on which CMDB data is most valuable when you are kicking off a new TBM program? Like, what should we be focusing on getting complete and accurate out the gate?
Well, Lindsay, I think that kind of leads into an upcoming question here, and I can touch on it. And I think the idea is configuration items, CI data exist across a couple of different areas. You have the classic IT CIs, things like technology, CPU, user, storage, that kind of stuff. Those are typically exercised fairly well because they're used in other management tools that IT uses. The key ones is how do you marry IT to financial data or service owner data? And really those key things are called join keys. So how do I get a server to a specific application and service? And you need to marry up that financial data, which might be vendor or manufacturer that gets GL data to it, or otherwise it's asset tag or serial number. So you can look at your fixed asset registry and link it back to your IT CMDB. So there's a large list of things that are potentially needed, but those key join attributes are the ones that I've found that once you find those, it makes all the manual work start to go away. It's still there, but there's a lot of manual work.
Okay, thank you.
Richard, I see you have your hands up.
Just trying to come up with good data, great data. You'll have people that own different parts of those different domains. So you might have people that own the infrastructure, people that own applications, and so forth. They're essentially using that data in the CMDB to get their day-to-day jobs done, right? So they might all have different views of how the data needs to be mapped in the CMDB. Multiple times, I've worked through maybe having like governance or maybe having like accountability against having like a standard of how data needs to work. But it still makes it very difficult because things like ServiceNow have, limitations on how people could track their workflows. And so it essentially creates a conflict between governance and operations, right? And then trying to tie all that back to the TBM model creates gaps. And so how have you guys dealt with working across multiple teams that own different parts of the CMDB and trying to hold everyone accountable to the output that comes out of the TBM model? Because ultimately that's what drives costs and insights.
I think, and I cover this in some of the upcoming questions that we've already worked through, and I would say when you look at how do I curate data, sustainability needs to be really heavily looked at. You should be getting 90+% of your attributes through some means of automation. I think there are only a handful of, and I'm a ServiceNow background person here, so there's only a handful of classes that you would really be looking at manually entering. You can't really discover apps that are business apps. You really can't discover services. So those are the things that would be manually created, but they all need to be related back into that infrastructure. The key, I think, to doing this is finding that sustainability of getting your data, because that also ensures it's going to be complete. It also ensures there's no staleness to it. And there shouldn't be a question then of who's updating it. The trick starts to become, how do I start to relate these things back together? And I think one of the key differentiators that you have in today's world, you have both physical on-prem data centers, you have virtualization, and you have cloud. They all kind of do things a little differently. Let's pick on cloud, because that's kind of where a lot of people are moving. When you spin up a cloud service, you tag that with information. You should be tagging it, and then this will be very tactical with your business app, with your environment, because now this starts to get in a position that you can map these things programmatically together. Now I can start to put my cost at that lowest level. And I really believe in taking the cost and letting that bubble up, because that's where you start to understand what compute expenses are, maybe versus storage expenses. You have that granularity, but you can bubble that up into your TCO at a application layer.
Thank you, Flo. So you have mentioned that applications or services that can be configured automatically. Do you have any recommendations to the folks out here that what's the best way to manage this data in ServiceNow?
Definitely having good governance and processes in place as you start to spin this up. Starting foundationally. I think one of the key things is that you need to have that foundation built in order for you to start to build up your instances, your services, your business applications. They need to meet at some point. The key is really managing the process of how they start to have relationships created, whether you buy service mapping or you manually do that, or other ways to programmatically do it. Who is in that governance side of it is not everybody should be able to create relationships. You will end up with, for lack of a better analogy, a spaghetti plate of relationships, and everything will relate to everything.
Thank you, Paul. So now I know there's still some questions out there. However, we have to move to the next topic, and we'll have more time for Q&A at the end. So Justin, I know you have mentioned this earlier. You have touched this question a little bit earlier, but I'm going to ask you it again. Which CMDB attributes are most critical for TBM mapping and cost modeling?
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily a tough question, but is there a finite list of attributes? Probably not. It all depends. And the way I say this is you want technology business management or your cost model and your CMDB to be less of a technical inventory, but more of a service-oriented ledger. And that's kind of what Paul had said. It's easy to get the things in that are technology, which is gigabytes, CPUs, database instances, and stuff like that, because typically there's automation that pulls that in. Building services, defining applications, that's where things get a little bit more tough. And honestly, it requires a shared governance model between IT, finance, and service owners to accomplish this. IT is really responsible for those classic technology CIs. Finance is responsible for the financial assets and depreciation. And then service owners are responsible for defining the service catalog, but also the consumption of their service so you can do proper allocation out. And basically, these are CIs that exist across various departments or disparate systems. A lot of this information may come in from a financial management system and so forth, but really the key ones are your join keys or your application drivers. And some of those are a join key could be attributes that allow general ledger to be or your spend to be mapped to vendor invoices or to pull out vendor invoices and technical assets. Your vendor and your manufacturer are essential for mapping hardware and software maintenance. Asset tags and serial numbers are your primary link between your asset register and CMDB to bring costs across. And then cost centers are really key because that identifies who owns what and who's consuming what. And then we've got some ones that are lesser, like environmental, like production, dev, and test. That can help allocate maybe a larger amount of costs based off the criticality of the asset. And then you've got services and application mapping, and that really creates that mapping between technology and infrastructure to business solutions, such as applications and services. Business applications, which are typically defined in an application portfolio, the linking of infrastructure, CIs, and application help define total cost of ownership for that application. And then infrastructure CIs must roll up to those business applications, then ultimately applications up to services that the organization can provide. And as we can see in that, service owners have a role to play, finance has a role to play, and IT has a role to play. And then basically allocation or consumption. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, which is when you don't have trustworthy data or your data is still maturing, you might go with an even spread methodology. Once you understand that you have applications and service, you understand your consumption, then you start going to a consumption-based model. And that then you can allocate costs based on CPU, RAM count, gigabytes, database, where you can spread some of those expensive database SQL licenses across other applications and services. But again, it's how do you get that server to an application? How do you get the application to the business service, and then the application out to the business unit? And those CIs that link those various levels between IT, finance, and service owners are key to being able to do that.
Thank you, Justin. I saw there's a question in chat that's kind of related to what you just went through. It's related to the ServiceNow discovery and service mapping. Could you touch that a little bit?
Well, I can talk about service mapping in general, and I think one of the key things is, going back to the Wild West, and I think everybody's heard the term of shadow IT. When a department needs something or an initiative needs something, think tools like ServiceNow having a service request process is super key. That way you're not building servers, deploying application, purchasing things, and then the end trying to assemble all those pieces together into a service costing. Typically what you would do is get a maybe a server request process. That server request process you'd gather things like CPU, memory, storage, all that other kind of classic IT stuff, but at the exact same time, you would relate this to an application. You would relate it to a cost center. You would have a definition on how you request this application, and then you'd have another process that would go out and users would be able to request the application, and we could record consumption. So having a request process, then initially after that, an auditing process, understanding who's using it, and then followed by a decommission process. If those are all in place, the data tends to manage itself at that point, as long as shadow IT or shadow processes aren't backdooring getting these things deployed.
Thanks, Justin. Now I'm going to pivot to you, Paul. How can organizations face down data improvements in the CMDB to support TBM rollout?
So as I reviewed that topic, I took the approach of a little bit of a CMDB remediation, because that's what we want to improve data. And the common saying that kind of popped in my mind is, and I know it's overused, it's a journey, but it's a journey of 1,000 steps that starts with the first step. And I think that is picking your destination. The common thing I like to ask is, what does good look like? And really get that realistic approach to it. It should be something that is readily attainable. So you want to make sure this is grounded a little bit. We want to use some industry-based technology like ServiceNow Discovery. And you also have to put it in perspective of what resources, and typically this is down to what is the organization willing to put behind this effort, and look at that, because this does take time, it does take effort, which usually equates to cost. The end result is not something that you're going to achieve in 6 months, 1 year. This is a multi-year approach, most likely, because there's time to deliver, time to consume. So assessing your current situation is another big part of this thing, to make sure to see what you're doing. A lot of times there's some good there, and maybe it just needs some tweaking. But I would definitely recommend finding a partner to come in, work with you. And the reason this starts to get really important, you have somebody with an outside eye looking at it that's going to ask some leading questions. And I will guarantee there's going to be some aha moments as people are describing the environment, as they're looking at it, and you're kind of collaborating together. And I think the key is to collaborate with somebody and find that partner, not just outsource it. So the next steps are, let's build that destination. Where do we go to? And there's some key things that you really want to consider in doing within this. Remove that unnecessary baggage. Go through that CMDB and take a little inventory. A lot of times there's extra fields there. A lot of times there's extra stale CIs. Start to remove that out so you can actually have a little bit faster environment, because you'll remove potentially millions of CIs as you look at cleanup. Most mature platforms, specifically we've talked about ServiceNow today a lot, have a very mature CMDB class structure that you can use. I recommend you stay as much to out of box as possible. Start to learn to live within your skin, so to say. Start at that foundation and build upon it. That iterate out there, fully agree. Again, consider bringing a partner in this journey. Don't hand it off completely. Collaborate together. Keep some of that knowledge in-house. And I really like the build with this incremental improvement focus. It does two great things that I have found bring a lot of success to these projects. You deliver value faster. So when people start to see it changing and it makes it real for them, they get invigorated. They get excited about what this is going to do. The other aspect for it is it allows for more advanced functionality as you work in that design. So as you continue to add to it, you spark that creativity. So it's really important to drive both of those like that. The other aspect is understanding where your manual efforts, and we talked a little bit about that already today, where we talked about what are some of those manual CIs that we're going to create, some of the relationships out there. want to tie back into a little bit of what Justin said with that service catalog request. You know, one of the other things that I would highly recommend that you make a standard is always the business application and always the environment it's going to support. Those are key elements when you start to do, I prefer tag-based mapping because now I have my tags that I can create, but I can also feed that to my cloud, which is going to then tag that application. It's going to tag that with the environment it's tied to, which is important than how we start to build out relationships more in a sustainable manner. And then when you talk about cost data originations, they originate from multiple sources. Clearly, you're going to have licensing that's going to come from applications. You might have data centers that are on-prem and have asset, so you're going to have asset data flowing in. If you have cloud providers, you're going to have a full FinOps within that, but you're going to get data at those service levels. Very important to consider bringing that into the platform, making the platform the aggregated source of truth. It's close to the data. It allows you to start doing some automations, some business decisions based on that, and start to drive that. I see a couple of key tactical things I just want to run through quickly. With me here. You know, CMDB foundational items, principal classes. There is a question up there, well, not all CI classes are equal. You're right. Pick your principal classes that matter the most. A lot of times it's servers, it's end user compute, it might be network gear, business applications, and there might be others that for your organization that make sense. Definitely look at those. Those are the ones that you focus on that are going to be driving that value proposition and being linked to. Keep sustainability in your solutions. Again, I brought this up earlier. 90% of that data should be found through an automated source. Keeps it fresh, keeps it real, and always looking at those 3 C's. And the last aspect to it would be tier structures of your applications. So in other words, not all apps are the same. So there's a concept of tier structuring, and there's another that if you have any InfoSec background, crown jewels. It's important that organizationally that you focus on your tier 1s and your crown jewels, because that's what's driving your business forward, probably delivering the most value in services.
Thank you, Paul and Justin, for this very helpful information. So let's kind of pivot to our last topic. What does the success look like? What does it look like when your team has corralled the chaos and brought TBM and CMDB data under control? Justin, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think this is kind of widespreading, but once you corral the chaos, and sometimes I don't think you ever really corral it because there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on to make that data reliable, to make that data dependable. It could be from making sure that people are following processes, ensuring data cleanup is occurring, or even just tackling projects to make sure that additional data is available so it can be evaluated. But once you corral this or have a process to manage it, what's interesting is the conversations that happen from the data. So if you're in a budget meeting, all of a sudden people are pulling up the cost model and making on-the-spot decisions based off the data that's there because they've got they rely on it, they like it, they're confident in it. That makes conversations and decisions move quicker. I think most people in this today would probably say they've been in meetings where it's going to take a couple of weeks to pull the numbers together to understand whether or not we want to do X, Y, or Z. When you have a cost model in front of you, you've got potentially data that's up to date to the hour, most likely to the quarter, and the ability to make decisions based off of a cost of a service or deploying a new service at your fingertips makes things move that much quicker. And business decisions happen quicker, both for good and bad purposes. But
so I took the positioning of going off of what I said before. What does good look like? So what what is this going to allow me to do? And I'm a little more CMDB centric on some of this because of my background. But when I look at what does good look like, you got the chaos under control. It's about my data is collected through sustainable means, that it becomes the source of truth, and it's refreshed at a rate. Everybody's a little different, but a rate that supports the business to drive whatever automation and delivery of services and business decisions. Governance is in place. Key to driving best practices and keeping sprawl is good governance. Processes are used for predictable, automated, and auditable actions. Collecting the data is one thing, but definitely we need to have predictability, and we need to be able to support any audits on some of these. Understanding the importance of what applications are driving our business, and we briefly touched on that earlier. What are my crown jewels to this organization? I like the costs aligning at that CI lower level perspective, because I like to have that bubble up. To me, that's where I get the details. I think it mimics cloud billing quite nicely. When I know what good looks like as well, I work a lot with organizations trying to rationalize applications. Rationalizing is great, but the best rationalization is you start to do this upfront when you look at capabilities that are tied back to my applications, and I don't bring that in and have that expense up front. But if you're in that phase of it, at least I can get the data and rationalize things out of my environment. From an operations perspective, when an incident or outage happens, I know what services are affected. If I do have really good costing data, I can really explain what is the impact to my organization by that route, and what is the cost to continue to move that forward. A mature CMDB also has a number of other areas it affects, and really is more of a partnership with a lot of these areas. It supports info security, data classification. So if you work in industries like healthcare or financial areas, very important. Risk management, procurement, vendor risk management. Those are just some of the big ones that are going to rely on that data to help drive their processes, which also then have a direct impact to how things are architected, how things are derived for usage, and expenses back to the organization as well.
Thank you, Paul. I do see there's a follow-up question for you. Could you explain what you mean by sustainable and provide some examples on like what the perfect sustainability looks like?
Sustainability in a solution, specifically, let's talk about CIs. If you use ServiceNow Discovery or their ACC client, for instance, huge fan of those. They deliver great value. Sustainability is I don't have to go out and curate that data over and over and validate it exists, because those two products will go out and have a timeline. Either you're scanning your networks on a daily, weekly time frame. I'm going to touch that. I'm going to update that CI, and I'm going to know it's fresh. So I know what's out there. That's sustainable. I didn't have to do any action. I'm leveraging technology to keep my data up to date.
Thank you, Paul. So now we are open for Q&A. So for anyone who have questions for Paul and Justin, feel free to raise your hand or come off mute. See, Shafi, have your hands up.
Yes. Hi, how are you? Great conversation. Really appreciate everybody, especially Paul and everyone. My question was, it was mentioned about tag-based mapping. Is that referring to the principal asset classes, or just want to kind of dig into that a little bit, understand?
The way I look at it and like to use it would be, And it kind of mimics what you're doing within cloud. Cloud, you typically are tagging with an app and an environment. So why not continue to build on it? And it would be really looking at those principal classes and how do I tag those pieces in that key value pairing and then utilize that to create relationships. The power of that, especially, is again, we look at processes and ways that things are ordered in cloud compute. In a process, if I already say, hey, what's the business app that this is associated with? Because why am I bringing a server or piece of infrastructure in the door? For the most part, I should know what it's being tied back to, and I should know the environment because now I need to get to that instance a little bit. That's where the tagging comes in, and utilizing that again makes it a very easy mapping session at that point to do it from both process or from cloud-based tags that you can consume.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rosie, I see you have your hand up.
I think it was Paul, you mentioned that, everything relates to everything if you let it get out of control. Are there any best practices about what is a good sort of set of rules for how you might guide that kind of tagging? So if I have an app that uses a service that uses a service, I don't necessarily follow that chain forever.
Right. I think the organization I was at that opened it up to let everybody do relationships, we ended up after, I don't know, about 2 years having to throw away every single relationship and start over. The key is governance on relationships and governance on your tagging. I like to lean towards the side of that should be done a little bit more judiciously, that we lock it down, we really make it tight to how that equipment's coming in or how that service is being utilized, and drive consistency in that. So I wouldn't open it up to everyone.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had a couple of comments on that too, Paul, is again, it's having those certain things defined. If you've got a service catalog, you're possibly limited to the services you need to map to. But if another department wants sub-services, or if you have locations you have to map to, and if somebody wants to get it to the floor level versus the building level, the governance needs to occur to make sure that the business agrees to that level of mapping. Or otherwise, like you said, you can go way deep. You can even do it to the desk or to the person or and it keeps going.
Right.
Sorry, coming off mute. One last question for you, Paul and Justin. So what would you recommend as the immediate actions you can take away from this call for the audience here?
Justin, do you want to go first, or do you want me to jump in?
I can.
Sure.
Immediate actions, and this takes me back a few years, but when we started doing cost modeling in general, we just started, and we did a little bit of learning. We obviously got connected with good resources. That's why we're here today. But we just started, and we started with the data that we had, and I know I've seen a couple of comments related to perfect data. There's no perfect data, and trying to make it perfect is probably not worth it to start with. But if you show people the data, the business will tell you if they like it or don't, but they'll also help you prioritize what they want to see. So starting and understanding what you have is the key. Additionally, you don't necessarily have to have a cost model application to start. You can do it in Excel. That will help you understand what you want, what your services are. And then once you define things, then you can start having a base to get yourself into an application. But I've seen a few organizations, including myself, that you get paralyzed in the beginning, and the key is just to start.
I would agree with that. I like the phrase analysis paralysis. If you wait for perfection, you will be waiting forever to get there. I do believe starting foundational things. Principal classes help you focus, but focus on the foundation of building out your CMDB to what it should be. If you know that you're having consistency problems and it's a manual enter, maybe your next step is, how can I get a discovery tool that's going to get me something more automated so I can focus then on, now I have the data, how do I go to the next step of building it into that relationship and getting it tied to other things.
Thanks. Yeah, agree with you all. It's a journey that we have to do, like baby step at a time. You can't wait till once you have the CMDB data fully validated and then pivot to TBM. Then at that point you'll be too late. Nan, I see you have your hand up. Let's do one more question before we close up.
Oh, I was just going to 100% on don't wait. So adopting TBM can often drive better CMDB data because you are tying dollars to the quality of the data. And we've seen with clients multiple times where the CMDB owner will be like, our CMDB data is just not great. I don't know if you want to use it. And then a year later, once they've started using it for cost modeling and it's getting tied to dollars, suddenly there's a lot more impetus for people to take action and clean up the data, and it's getting much more visibility than it was before, and it speeds up that process.
Hear, hear. I agree.
Okay, so just a friendly reminder, I know somebody had asked in the chat, this recording will be on YouTube shortly. And then if you are interested in learn about TBM adoption community, please feel free to join the TBM Council website. And lastly, if you have any more questions, please reach out to us on LinkedIn. We are happy to connect with you and chat a little more on CMDB. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Aja.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Adam.
Thank you for
here's
having
a
me.
quick, oh, of course, y'all were amazing. Y'all. And here's a quick QR code to join a strategy community. I will send a follow-up email once again with all the links and all the great, amazing things that we have to offer from the TBM Council. So if you don't get it during this presentation, it's totally fine. I'll send an email with all of the major links that we've discussed today. And then here's another quick QR code to join the TBM Council. If you're not already a member, this sends you to our registration page and the login page. So if you are a member, just to log in to continue the conversation. And if you're not a member, this is a great start to our registration page, as well as LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is another source of truth. We engage a lot on LinkedIn. So if you don't mind just following us for just quick updates and what's going on within the council in our communities, this would be a great way to stay engaged. All right, and then upcoming for our executives, we do have the Board of Directors Invitational in Phoenix. This remains our most intimate and strategic event for executive leaders. So you can join us in Phoenix, Arizona from May 11th through the 12th. This is strictly executive only event, crucial for high trust networking and deep dive strategic conversation. We do strongly encourage the board's attendance and participation. If you would like to read any more on this event, there is a webpage dedicated. You can find this on tbmcouncil.org under events, or you can follow this QR code right here to submit your interest in that to your high potential leaders. And then here we have our evergreen survey at the council. So this is our global salary survey. You can take this poll to help us benchmark TBM roles within an organization. So you can also find this on the tbmcouncil.org webpage, but I will be sending out major links as well. And then lastly, we have our TBM Council Ambassador Program. So this is just to lead the TBM Council into the next phase of growth. So we currently have 32 experienced TBM professionals of various SME categories listed on the screen that you can see right here, offering 3-month-long or one-on-one chat type of mentorship opportunities. Or we even have ambassadors speak to various companies. They might speak to your organization or whichever you may need an ambassadors to your liking. So you can scan this QR code to see who they are, depending on where you are and where you might need help within TBM, and you can reach out to an ambassador through this forum. And I just want to say a special thank you to all that have attended this meeting. If you do have any questions, as mentioned before, you will have all of our contact information, whether it's joining the strategy communities or regarding this amazing open forum. Feel free to ask on, and thank you all for attending.